The blood had barely dried on Clara Vaughn's hands when she stumbled into Truckee, California, in the spring of 1872. Her eyes red, rimmed, and hollow from 3 weeks without real sleep. She had been awake for so long that the world had taken on a dreamlike quality, everything slightly fuzzy at the edges, sounds coming to her as if through water. The wagon train she had been traveling with was 12 days behind her now, and the memories of what had happened there played on repeat every time she dared close her eyes. Her younger brother Samuel, only 16, had died in her arms after the Paiute raid, his blood soaking into the dusty Nevada soil while she pressed her hands uselessly against the wound in his chest. She had not been able to save him. She had not been able to save any of them. The main street of Truckee stretched before her, a muddy thoroughfare lined with rough timber buildings still showing the scars of the harsh Sierra Nevada winter. The town sat at the edge of the mountains, a stopping point for travelers heading to or from California's interior, and it bustled with the activity of fortune seekers, loggers, and railroad workers. Clara's dress hung loose on her frame, caked with trail dust and stained with rust-colored patches she tried not to think about. Her dark blonde hair, once pinned neatly, now hung in a tangled braid down her back. She was 21 years old and felt ancient. She needed work. She needed a place to stay. Most of all, she needed to feel safe enough to close her eyes for more than a few minutes at a time. The general store seemed as good a place as any to start asking questions. Clara pushed through the door, the small bell above it announcing her arrival with a cheerful jingle that seemed obscene given her state of mind. An older woman behind the counter looked up from her ledger, her eyes taking in Clara's bedraggled appearance with a mixture of pity and wariness. "Help you, miss?" the woman asked, her voice cautious. "I am looking for work," Clara said, her voice hoarse from disuse, "and lodging. I can cook, clean, so I am a hard worker." The woman set down her pencil and came around the counter, getting a closer look. "You are not from around here." "Where is your family?" "Gone," Clara said simply. The word felt like a stone in her mouth. "I am alone." The woman's expression softened slightly. "There is a boarding house 2 streets over run by Mrs. Henderson. She might have work in a room, but I will warn you this is a rough town. A young woman alone can find trouble easily here." Clara nodded, too tired to care much about warnings. She had already lived through the worst things she could imagine. What more could this town do to her, Mrs. Henderson was a stern-faced woman in her 50s who ran her boarding house with military efficiency. She looked Clara up and down, clearly unimpressed, but perhaps seeing something in her desperation that moved her to mercy. "I have got a room in the attic," Mrs. Henderson said. "Tiny thing, barely fits a bed, but it is yours if you can work for it. I need help with the cooking and cleaning. The railroad workers who stay here eat like horses and make messes like pigs." "I will take it," Clara said without hesitation. "You will start tomorrow morning, 5 o'clock sharp. Do not be late." Mrs. Henderson handed her a key. "The room is up those stairs, 3rd door on the right. There is a basin and pitcher up there. You look like you could use a wash." Clara climbed the narrow stairs, each step feeling like it required monumental effort. The room was indeed tiny, barely large enough for the narrow bed, a small table, and a wooden chair. But it had a door that locked and a window that looked out over the mountains, and that was more than she had hoped for. She poured water from the pitcher into the basin and washed her face and hands, watching the water turn brown with dirt and pink with diluted blood. She scrubbed until her skin was raw, but she still felt filthy. The memories still clung to her like cobwebs. When she finally lay down on the bed, still wearing her dress because she had nothing else to change into, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Her eyes drifted closed. She was so tired, so desperately tired. And then she was back on the trail, hearing the screams, seeing the arrows flying through the air, watching Samuel fall. Her eyes snapped open, her heart racing, a scream caught in her throat. She sat up, gasping, her whole body trembling. It was still daylight outside. She had been asleep for maybe 10 minutes. Clara lay back down, forced her eyes closed again. This time she made it perhaps 15 minutes before the nightmares dragged her back to consciousness, her hands clutching at the thin blanket, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She tried again. And again. And again. By the time true darkness fell outside her window, she had given up. She sat in the chair instead, staring out at the mountains silhouetted against the starlit sky, and waited for morning to come. The days that followed fell into a brutal rhythm. Clara worked from before dawn until after dark, cooking enormous meals for the boarding house residents, scrubbing floors, washing linens, doing whatever Mrs. Henderson required of her. The work was hard, but she welcomed it. It kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. It was the nights that were the problem. Every night she would climb to her attic room, lie down on her bed and try to sleep. And every night within minutes, the nightmares would come crashing in. She would see Samuel dying over and over again. She would see the other members of the wagon train, people she had known for months, cut down or fleeing in terror. She would hear the sounds, smell the smoke and blood. And she would jerk awake, sometimes screaming, sometimes crying, always terrified. After 2 weeks of this, she was barely functional. She moved through her days like a ghost, her hands performing their tasks through muscle memory while her mind floated somewhere far away. She dropped things. She forgot instructions. She nearly set the kitchen on fire when she left a pot on the stove too long. Mrs. Henderson noticed. "You look terrible," the older woman said bluntly one afternoon. "When is the last time you slept properly?" Clara could not remember. "I am fine," she lied. "You are not fine. You are going to hurt yourself or someone else if you keep on like this." Mrs. Henderson's stern expression softened slightly. "What happened to you out there?" Clara shook her head. She could not talk about it. If she started talking about it, she would fall apart completely, and she could not afford to fall apart. She had no one to catch her. That evening, one of the regular boarders, a railroad worker named Tom, cornered her in the kitchen as she was finishing the dishes. He was a big man who smelled of whiskey and sweat, and he had been watching her with increasing interest over the past week. "You are a pretty thing, even half dead on your feet," he said, moving too close. "Why do not you come have a drink with me? Might help you relax." Clara stepped back, her heart rate picking up. "No, thank you, I need to finish cleaning." He grabbed her arm, his grip painfully tight. "I was not really asking, sweetheart." "Let go of me," Clara said, her voice shaking. She was too tired for this. She did not have the energy to fight. The lady said, "Let go." The voice came from the kitchen doorway, deep and calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of threat. Tom released Clara's arm and spun around, his face flushing with anger at the interruption. Clara looked at the man in the doorway and felt something shift in her chest. He was enormous, well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they nearly filled the doorframe. His long, dark hair was tied back from his face, revealing strong features weathered by years of sun and wind. His arms, visible beneath the rolled-up sleeves of his shirt, were corded with muscle. He wore buckskin trousers and heavy boots, and there was a knife on his belt that looked well used. Everything about him spoke of strength and danger, but his brown eyes, when they met Clara's, were surprisingly gentle. "This is none of your business, Jacobson," Tom said, puffing himself up. "The girl and I were just talking. Did not look like talking from where I am standing." The big man, Jacobson apparently, took a step into the kitchen. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator despite his size. Looked like you were putting your hands on someone who did not want them there. Tom looked between Jacobson and Clara, clearly weighing his options. Whatever he saw in Jacobson's expression made him decide against pushing the issue. "Fine," he muttered. "She is not worth the trouble anyway." He pushed past Jacobson and disappeared into the hallway. Clara realized she was shaking. She gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. "You all right?" Jacobson asked, his voice gentler now. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. Up close, he was even more imposing. He had to weigh at least 200 pounds, all of it muscle. But there was something in his eyes, a kindness that did not match his rough exterior, that made her feel safer than she had in weeks. "That fellow has been watching you," Jacobson said. "You should be careful around him." "Thank you for intervening," Clara managed to say. "I should finish the dishes." Jacobson nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "You are the new girl, the one staying in the attic." "Yes, Clara Vaughn," Fletcher Jacobson. "Most folks just call me Fletcher." He studied her face for a moment, and Clara had the uncomfortable feeling that he was seeing far more than she wanted him to. "You look exhausted." Clara let out a laugh that had no humor in it. "I am. You should sleep." "I am trying," she said, and to her horror, felt tears prickling at her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. She would not cry in front of this stranger, no matter how kind his eyes were. Fletcher looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. "You cannot sleep," he said quietly. It was not a question. Clara shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. "Nightmares," she nodded. Fletcher was quiet for a moment, considering. "I know something about that," he finally said. "After the war, I could not sleep for near about a year. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back at Shiloh, hearing the guns, seeing the bodies." Clara looked at him with new eyes. He would have been the right age for the war. "How did you manage?" "Eventually, I went to the mountains. Got away from people, from noise, from everything that reminded me. Spent time in silence. It helped." He paused. "But what really helped was having someone I trusted watching my back. My brother came with me. Knowing he was there, keeping guard, I could finally rest." Clara felt something loosen in her chest at his words. Someone keeping guard. That was exactly what she needed. She needed to know she was safe while she was vulnerable and unconscious. But she had no one. No brother, no friend, no one she could trust. "I should let you finish your work," Fletcher said, mistaking her silence for dismissal. "Just wanted to make sure you were all right." "Wait," Clara said, the word escaping before she could stop it. Fletcher paused, looking back at her. Clara swallowed hard, trying to find the courage to ask for what she needed. "You said it helped, having someone watch over you while you slept." Fletcher nodded slowly. "It did." "I know this is a strange request from someone you just met," Clara said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "But I am so tired I can barely think. I have not slept more than a few minutes at a time in over a month. Every time I try, the nightmares come. But maybe if I knew someone was there, someone I knew would keep me safe, I could rest." She met his eyes. "Would you consider it? Just for one night, so I could sleep. You could sit outside my door, or in a chair in the room if that is more proper. I just need to know someone is watching." Most men would have thought she was mad, or would have seen it as an invitation for something else entirely. But Fletcher just looked at her with those kind, understanding eyes and nodded. "I can do that," he said simply. "Tonight, if you want, I will keep watch so you can rest." Clara felt tears spilling down her cheeks before she could stop them. "Thank you," she whispered. Fletcher's expression softened. "No need for thanks. We all need help sometimes. I will come up after you have finished your evening work. You show me where your room is. I will post myself outside your door, and you can sleep knowing nothing is going to bother you." That night, After Clara had completed her duties and the boarding house had settled into relative quiet, Fletcher climbed the stairs to the attic. He had a bedroll under one arm and a rifle in his other hand. Clara met him at her door, suddenly uncertain now that the moment had arrived. "You are sure about this?" she asked. "You do not have to. I know it is a strange thing to ask." "I offered," Fletcher said. "I keep my word." He looked at the narrow hallway outside her door and nodded. "I will set up right here. Door stays closed, but I will be right outside. Anyone tries to come up these stairs who should not, they will have to go through me first." Clara felt a wave of relief so intense it made her dizzy. "I do not know how to thank you." "Sleep," Fletcher said. "That will be thanks enough." Clara went into her tiny room and closed the door. She could hear Fletcher settling himself outside, the soft sound of him arranging his bedroll. Knowing he was there, just on the other side of that thin door, she felt something she had not felt since before the raid: safe. She lay down on her bed, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. Would this work? Or would the nightmares come anyway? She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, let it out slowly. She waited for the images to come, for Samuel's dying face to appear behind her eyelids. But instead she heard Fletcher shift slightly outside her door, heard the solid, real presence of him. A protector, a guardian standing watch. The tension in her body began to ease, muscle by muscle. Her breathing slowed. The darkness behind her eyelids remained just that, darkness, empty and peaceful. And Clara Vaughn, for the first time in over a month, drifted into true, deep sleep. She woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the sound of birds chirping outside. For a moment she was disoriented, not sure where she was or what had happened. Then she remembered. Fletcher. He had stood guard. She sat up quickly and looked at the window. The sun was well up. She had slept through the entire night and into the morning. Mrs. Henderson would be furious that she had not been downstairs at 5 o'clock to start breakfast. Clara scrambled out of bed and opened her door. Fletcher was gone, his bedroll with him, but there was a note on the floor written in surprisingly neat handwriting. "Told Mrs. H you were sick. She said to let you rest today. F." Clara clutched the note to her chest, feeling something warm unfold in her ribcage. This stranger had given her the gift of real sleep, the first peace she had known in so long, and had protected her from the consequences of that rest as well. She went downstairs to find Mrs. Henderson in the kitchen, preparing the midday meal. "You are awake," the older woman said. "Good. You looked half dead yesterday. I was starting to worry you were going to collapse on me." "I am sorry I was not here this morning," Clara began, but Mrs. Henderson waved her off. "That mountain man, Fletcher, he explained you were poorly, said he would vouch for your character and that you would make up the work." She gave Clara a shrewd look. "He is a good man, that one. Not much for town living, keeps to himself mostly, but honest and decent. You could do worse for a friend." "He is very kind," Clara said softly, "kind and then some. Now you feeling well enough to work, or do you need another day?" Clara shook her head. "I can work. I feel better than I have in weeks, actually." And it was true. The sleep had restored something in her, some fundamental resource that had been depleted past the point of function. She moved through the afternoon's work with an energy she had not possessed since before the raid. Her hands were steady. Her mind was clear. But as the day wore on and evening approached, she felt anxiety beginning to creep back in. Tonight she would have to try to sleep again. Would she be able to do it without Fletcher standing guard? Or would the nightmares come roaring back the moment she was alone? She was cleaning up after supper when Fletcher appeared in the kitchen doorway just as he had the night before. Her heart lifted at the sight of him. "Evening," he said. "I wanted to check and see how you are feeling." "Much better, thanks to you," Clara said. "I cannot tell you what a difference that sleep made." Fletcher nodded. a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Good, I am glad." There was a pause. Clara scrubbed at a pot that was already clean, trying to find the courage to ask. Finally, she just said it. "Would you be willing to do it again? Stand guard, I mean. I know I am asking a lot and I cannot pay you, but I am afraid that if I am alone tonight, the nightmares will come back." "I already planned on it," Fletcher said simply. "I will be up after you finish here." Clara felt her eyes stinging with grateful tears again. "Why are you being so kind to me? You do not even know me." Fletcher was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I know what it is like to need help and not have anyone to ask. I know what it is like to suffer alone because you think you have to be strong enough to handle everything yourself." His brown eyes met hers. "And I know what it is like to have nightmares so bad you would rather stay awake forever than face them. No one should have to go through that without help, not if there is someone who can provide it." That night, and the next, and the next, Fletcher came and stood guard outside Clara's door. Each night she slept soundly, peacefully, knowing he was there. And each day she grew stronger, more like her old self, or at least like a new version of herself that was slowly learning how to exist in this world where Samuel was gone. On the fourth night, as she was showing Fletcher up to her room, she found the courage to ask him something that had been puzzling her. "Why are you staying in town? Mrs. Henderson said you usually keep to the mountains." Fletcher settled himself outside her door before answering. "I come down every few months for supplies, usually stay a week or so. I was planning to head back up 3 days ago, but I figured you still needed someone to stand watch." Clara felt something twist in her chest. "You have been staying in town for me. But you must have things you need to do, places you need to be." "Nothing that cannot wait," Fletcher said. "The mountains will still be there. You need help now." "I cannot ask you to put your life on hold for me," Clara protested. "You did not ask. I am offering." Fletcher looked up at her, his expression serious. "Clara, I do not know what happened to you out there on the trail, and I am not going to pry, but I know trauma when I see it. I know what it looks like when someone is barely holding on. You need time to heal, and you cannot heal without rest. So I am going to keep standing guard until you do not need me to anymore." Clara sat down on the top step, suddenly unable to stand. "I do not understand why you would do this for a stranger." "You are not a stranger anymore," Fletcher said quietly. "Not after 4 nights of this." And he was right, Clara realized. Over the past few days, they had talked in the evenings before she went to sleep, sharing small pieces of their lives. She had learned that Fletcher was 27, that he had indeed fought in the war for the Union, that he had come west afterward because he could not stand the crowds and noise of city life anymore, that he trapped and hunted in the mountains, sold furs and meat to the trading posts, and lived a largely solitary existence. And he had learned, though she had not told him explicitly, that she was running from something terrible, that she had lost someone she loved, that she was afraid in a way that went bone deep. They were not strangers anymore. They were 2 people who had found each other in the darkness and were helping each other toward the light. "Thank you," Clara whispered, "for everything." "Sleep," Fletcher said gently. "That is all the thanks I need." A week turned into 2. Fletcher stayed in town, standing guard outside Clara's door every night, spending his days hunting in the foothills or helping out around town with odd jobs. Clara worked at the boarding house, growing stronger and more present with each night of real sleep. And slowly, tentatively, the 2 of them grew closer. It started with the evening conversations. Fletcher would arrive to take up his post, and before Clara went into her room, they would talk. At first just pleasantries, updates on their days, but gradually the conversations deepened. Clara found herself telling him about her life before the trail, about growing up in Missouri, about her parents who had died of influenza 2 years ago, about Samuel who had been all the family she had left. "He wanted to see California," she said one evening, her voice thick with emotion. "He was so excited about starting over somewhere new. I was the one who was hesitant. I wish now I had tried harder to talk him out of it. If we had just stayed in Missouri, he would still be alive." "You cannot think like that," Fletcher said gently. "You did not know what was going to happen. You were just trying to give him a better life. That is not something to feel guilty about." "I was supposed to protect him," Clara said, tears streaming down her face. "He was my little brother. My responsibility." "You did protect him for his whole life up until then," Fletcher said. "And what happened was not your fault. You cannot control everything, Clara. Sometimes terrible things happen, and all we can do is survive them and try to keep going." Clara looked at him through her tears. "Is that what you did? After the war?" Fletcher nodded slowly. "Took me a long time to stop blaming myself for the men I could not save, the friends I watched die. I kept thinking if I had just been faster, smarter, stronger, I could have prevented it. But eventually I realized that kind of thinking was just another way of torturing myself. The war was going to happen whether I was there or not. People were going to die. All I could do was survive and try to make my life mean something in their honor." "Does it get easier?" Clara asked. "The guilt, it does," Fletcher said. "Not all at once, and maybe it never goes away completely, but it gets lighter, more bearable. You learn how to carry it." Clara nodded, wiping at her tears. "I am sorry. I am not usually this emotional." "You have earned the right to be emotional," Fletcher said. "You have been through hell. You are allowed to cry about it." And somehow, having his permission, Clara found herself crying harder than she had since Samuel died. All the grief and fear and guilt she had been holding back came pouring out. And Fletcher just sat there outside her door, keeping watch, letting her fall apart because he knew she needed to. When the tears finally subsided, Clara felt wrung out but somehow lighter. "Thank you for listening," she said softly. "Anytime," Fletcher said. And she believed him. Fletcher, for his part, began to share his own stories. He told her about growing up in Pennsylvania, about his parents who still lived there and worried about him being so far away. About his younger brother Daniel, who had also fought in the war and was now working as a schoolteacher back east. "You miss them?" Clara asked. "Your family?" "Sometimes," Fletcher admitted, "but I cannot go back to that life. Too many people, too much noise, too many memories. The mountains are where I belong now." "Do you ever get lonely?" Fletcher was quiet for a moment. "I did not think I did. I thought I preferred the solitude. But these past couple weeks, talking with you, I am realizing maybe I was just avoiding connection because I was afraid of losing people again." Clara understood that. She had been thinking the same thing about herself. It was easier to be alone than to risk caring about someone and having them ripped away. But somehow, despite her best intentions to keep her distance, Clara was starting to care about Fletcher Jacobson. She found herself looking forward to the evenings, to their conversations, to the sound of his voice. She noticed things about him, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness in his rough hands, the way he listened to her like what she was saying actually mattered. And she noticed the way he looked at her too, with a warmth that went beyond simple kindness. It was dangerous, she knew, to start developing feelings for him. He was a mountain man, a solitary soul who would eventually go back to his isolated life in the high country. And she was a mess, a broken thing still trying to piece herself back together. Nothing good could come from this attachment, but her heart, it seemed, had not gotten the message. One evening, about 3 weeks after Fletcher had first stood guard for her, Clara finished her work early and found herself with free time before bed. Fletcher was already upstairs, settling in for his nightly watch, and on impulse, Clara grabbed 2 mugs of coffee from the kitchen and carried them up. "Thought you might like something warm," she said, offering him one of the mugs. Fletcher accepted it with a smile. "Thank you. It is getting cold up here at night." Clara sat down on the top step, as had become her habit during their evening talks. "I have been thinking," she said carefully. "You have been standing guard for me for 3 weeks now. That is 21 nights of sleeping in a hallway instead of a proper bed. You must be exhausted." "I am fine," Fletcher said. "I have slept in worse places. Still, it is not fair to you." Clara took a sip of her coffee, gathering her courage. "The thing is, I am not sure I am ready to try sleeping alone yet. The one night you were late getting here and I tried to nap in the afternoon, the nightmares came back immediately. I think I still need someone standing guard." "Then I will keep doing it," Fletcher said simply. "But you have your own life to get back to," Clara protested. "You cannot spend the rest of your days watching over me." "Why not?" Fletcher asked, and there was something in his voice, a weight to the question, that made Clara look at him sharply. Their eyes met, and Clara felt the air between them change, charged with something electric and new. She saw in Fletcher's eyes what she had been afraid to acknowledge in her own heart. This was not just kindness anymore. This was not just a man helping a stranger. This was something deeper, something that had been growing quietly between them during all those evening conversations and stolen glances. "Fletcher," she said softly, "we should not." "Should not what?" His voice was gentle, but his eyes were intense. "Whatever this is between us, we should not pursue it. You have your life in the mountains. I have nothing to offer you but damage and nightmares." Fletcher set down his coffee mug and shifted position so he was facing her directly. "Clara, I am going to say something, and I need you to really hear me. You are not damaged. You are hurt, and that is different. Hurt can heal. And as for having nothing to offer, that is the biggest load of nonsense I have ever heard. You are brave and strong and kind. You have been through hell and you are still here, still fighting, still trying. That takes a kind of courage most people do not have." "You barely know me," Clara whispered. "I know you well enough. I know you work harder than anyone else in this boarding house even when you can barely keep your eyes open. I know you are kind to Mrs. Henderson even when she is short with you. I know you cry when you think no one can hear, but you show up the next morning ready to try again. I know you loved your brother enough that losing him nearly destroyed you. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. But your life," Clara said weakly. "The mountains." "The mountains will still be there," Fletcher said. "But you, Clara Vaughn, you are here now. And I would be a fool to walk away from something that is starting to matter to me just because it is not what I planned." Clara felt her heart hammering in her chest. "What are you saying?" Fletcher reached out and gently took her hand. His palm was rough and calloused, but his touch was incredibly gentle. "I am saying that somewhere along the way, standing guard outside your door and talking with you every evening, I started to fall for you. And I think maybe you might be feeling something similar." Clara looked down at their joined hands. She should pull away, she should protect herself. But instead she found herself squeezing his hand, holding on like he was an anchor in a storm. "I am afraid," she admitted. "Everyone I care about gets taken from me." "I know," Fletcher said. "I am afraid too. But Clara, I have been living in the mountains alone for 5 years because I was too afraid to let anyone matter to me again. And you know what I have learned? Being safe from pain also means being safe from joy. I do not want to live like that anymore." Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks again, but these were different from the grief tears she had shed before. These were tears of hope and fear and possibility all mixed together. "I do not know how to do this," she whispered. "I do not know how to open my heart again." "Neither do I," Fletcher said. "So maybe we can figure it out together. And then, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Fletcher leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet and tentative, a question more than a statement. Clara felt something in her chest crack open, some frozen part of her heart beginning to thaw. When they finally pulled apart, Fletcher rested his forehead against hers. "I am not going anywhere," he said softly. "Not unless you tell me to." "Do not go," Clara said. "Please do not go." "I will not," Fletcher promised, and Clara believed him. After that night, things shifted between them. Fletcher still stood guard outside Clara's door, but now it felt different, charged with acknowledged feelings and growing affection. During the days when Clara was not working, she would spend time with Fletcher. He taught her about the mountains, about tracking and hunting and reading the weather. She taught him about books and poetry, things he had not had much time for in his rough life. Mrs. Henderson noticed the change and gave Clara a knowing look. "That mountain man is sweet on you," she said one afternoon. Clara felt herself blushing. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to anyone with eyes," Mrs. Henderson said, but her tone was not unkind. "He is a good man, Clara. One of the best I have known. If you are thinking about accepting his attentions, you could do far worse." "I do not know what I am thinking," Clara admitted. "Everything still feels so uncertain." "Life is uncertain," Mrs. Henderson said. "But that does not mean you should not grab hold of happiness when it is offered to you." A month had passed since Clara had first arrived in Truckee when Fletcher finally asked her to go somewhere with him. "I want to show you something," he said. "Up in the mountains. Would you trust me enough to come with me for the day?" Clara did not hesitate. "Yes." They left early in the morning, Fletcher leading the way up a trail that wound through towering pine trees and alongside rushing streams. The climb was steep, and Clara was breathing hard by the time they reached a clearing about halfway up the mountain. But the view took her breath away more than the exertion had. Truckee spread out below them, the town looking small and peaceful from this distance. Beyond it, she could see the shimmer of Donner Lake, and beyond that, more mountains stretching to the horizon. The sky was enormous, endlessly blue, and the air smelled of pine and wildflowers. "This is beautiful," Clara breathed. "This is nothing," Fletcher said with a smile. "Wait until you see where I actually live." They continued climbing, the trail growing narrower and more rugged. Fletcher helped Clara over the difficult spots, his hand steady and strong in hers. She felt safe with him, she realized. Not just physically safe, though that was true, but safe in a deeper way. Safe to be herself, broken pieces and all. Finally, they emerged into another clearing, this one larger, with a small cabin nestled at the edge. It was rough but solid, built from logs that had weathered to a soft gray. There was a garden plot beside it, currently overgrown with weeds, and a stream running nearby. "You built this?" Clara asked, impressed. Fletcher nodded. "Took me 2 summers. It is not much, but it is home." They went inside, and Clara looked around with interest. The single room was sparsely furnished with just a bed, a table and chairs, a wood stove, and shelves holding supplies and a few books. But it was clean and well maintained, and there was a window that looked out over the mountains, letting in the sunlight. "It is perfect," Clara said, and meant it. "I can see why you love it here." Fletcher came to stand beside her at the window. "I wanted you to see it, to see where I live and what my life is like. Because, Clara, I need to ask you something, and I want you to have all the information before you answer." Clara turned to face him, her heart starting to pound. "What is it?" Fletcher took both her hands in his. "I am falling in love with you. Actually, I think I am already there. I love you, Clara Vaughn, and I want you to marry me. I want you to come live up here with me to build a life together. I know it is isolated, and I know it is not an easy life, but I promise I will do everything in my power to make you happy and to keep you safe." Clara felt like she could not breathe. It was too much, too fast. She had only known him for a month. But even as her mind threw up all the logical objections, her heart was singing. "Say something," Fletcher said, and she could hear the nervousness in his voice. "If it is no, I will understand. I will still stand guard for you as long as you need me to, but I had to ask. I had to at least try." "You love me," Clara said, the words feeling strange and wonderful in her mouth. "I love you," Fletcher confirmed. "I love your strength and your kindness and your courage. I love how hard you try, even when everything is difficult. I love talking with you. I love the way you look at the world, finding beauty even after everything you have been through. I love you, Clara, all of you, even the parts you think are broken." Clara felt tears streaming down her face again. "I love you too," she said, the admission feeling like jumping off a cliff. "I did not want to, I tried not to, but I do. I love you, Fletcher Jacobson." Fletcher pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, and she felt something settle in her soul. This was home. Not the cabin, not the mountains, but this man and the way he made her feel. "Is that a yes?" Fletcher asked, pulling back to look at her face. "To marrying me," Clara laughed, the sound bright and free in a way she had not heard herself laugh since before Samuel died. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." Fletcher whooped and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around the small cabin. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, and Clara kissed him back, pouring all her hope and love and gratitude into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning like fools, Fletcher said, "We can get married as soon as you want, tomorrow if you are willing. There is a preacher in town who can do it." "What about your family?" Clara asked. "Do you not want them here?" Fletcher shook his head. "It would take months for them to get here, and I do not want to wait months. We can write them, tell them the news. Maybe someday we can visit them or they can come here. But right now, I just want to start our life together." "Tomorrow, then," Clara said, feeling reckless and happy. "Let us get married tomorrow." They spent the rest of the day at the cabin, Fletcher showing Clara around the property and making plans for their future. He would need to do some work on the cabin before winter, maybe add a second room. The garden could be replanted. They would need to stock up on supplies for the cold months. It was all so practical and domestic and normal, and Clara found herself getting excited in a way she had not thought possible a month ago. She was actually planning a future. She was actually looking forward to tomorrow instead of dreading it. As they made their way back down the mountain in the fading light, Fletcher said, "You know, if we are getting married tomorrow, you will not need me to stand guard anymore. You will be sleeping next to me instead." Clara felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. "What if the nightmares come back? What if I wake up screaming and disturb you?" Fletcher stopped on the trail and turned to face her. "Then I will hold you and remind you that you are safe. That is what husbands do, Clara. They stand by their wives, nightmares and all." "You really want this?" Clara asked. "All the messiness that comes with me, I want all of it," Fletcher said firmly. "The good, the bad, the messy, the beautiful, I want you, Clara, all of you." And Clara, who had spent the last month afraid to hope, finally let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have this. That she deserved this. That happiness was not something that only happened to other people. They were married the next afternoon in a simple ceremony at the small church in Truckee. Mrs. Henderson stood as witness, along with the shopkeeper and a few other townspeople who had gotten to know Clara during her time working at the boarding house. Clara wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her buy, and Fletcher wore clean buckskins and had trimmed his beard and tied back his hair. The preacher said the words, and Fletcher and Clara said their vows, promising to love and cherish each other for the rest of their days. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Fletcher kissed Clara with such tenderness that she felt tears gathering in her eyes again. "I love you, Mrs. Jacobson," Fletcher murmured against her lips. "I love you too," Clara said, and felt the truth of it all the way down to her bones. That night, for the first time, Clara went to sleep not in her tiny attic room but in Fletcher's arms. They had rented a proper room for the night, before heading up to the cabin in the morning. As Clara lay with her head on Fletcher's chest, listening to his heartbeat, she felt a peace she had not known in so long she had almost forgotten what it felt like. "You all right?" Fletcher asked softly, his hand running through her hair. "I am more than all right," Clara said. "I am happy." "Good," Fletcher said. "That is all I want, for you to be happy and safe." Clara closed her eyes, expecting the familiar anxiety to creep in, the fear of the nightmares returning. But with Fletcher's arms around her, his steady breathing and strong heartbeat anchoring her to the present, she felt only calm. And that night, for the first time since Samuel died, Clara slept peacefully not because someone was standing guard, but because she had found someone who would walk through life beside her. Someone who would guard her heart as carefully as he had once guarded her door. The nightmares still came occasionally in the weeks and months that followed. But when they did, Fletcher was there to wake her gently, to hold her while she cried, to remind her that she was safe and loved. And gradually, slowly, the nightmares became less frequent, less intense, until they were only rare visitors instead of constant companions. Life at the cabin took some adjustment. Clara had to learn how to live in the wilderness, how to help Fletcher with hunting and trapping, how to preserve food for the winter, how to entertain herself during the long, quiet days. But she found she loved it. She loved the peace of the mountains, the way the world felt clean and new each morning. She loved working side by side with Fletcher, building a life together from scratch. And she loved Fletcher more with each passing day. She loved the way he was patient with her when she made mistakes, the way he laughed at her jokes, the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. She loved his strength and his gentleness, the way he could track a deer for miles but would carefully move a spider outside rather than kill it. Winter came to the mountains, and they spent the cold months snowed in, keeping each other warm and entertained with stories and games and long conversations by the fire. Fletcher taught Clara how to read tracks in the snow, how to tell which trees were which even without leaves, how to find her way in the wilderness. Clara taught Fletcher poetry and songs, shared her memories of her parents and Samuel, helped him see that talking about the past did not mean living in it. They healed together, two wounded souls finding wholeness in each other. Spring returned, bringing with it wildflowers and rushing streams and the return of the animals to the high country. And with spring came news that sent Clara's hand flying to her stomach in wonder and terror and joy. "Fletcher," she said one morning, catching his hand and placing it on her belly. "I think I am carrying your child." Fletcher's eyes went wide, and then a smile spread across his face so bright it could have rivaled the sun. "Truly, truly," Clara confirmed. "I have been feeling sick in the mornings and my courses are late. I think there is a baby coming." Fletcher pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. "A baby," he breathed. "Our baby. Clara, you have made me the happiest man alive." "Are you not worried," Clara asked, "about me giving birth up here so far from town, so far from a doctor?" "We will go down to Truckee when it gets closer to your time," Fletcher assured her. "Mrs. Henderson can help, and there is a midwife in town. I will take care of everything. You just focus on staying healthy and growing our child." The months of Clara's pregnancy passed in a haze of wonder and fear and anticipation. Fletcher was attentive to the point of being overprotective, barely letting Clara do any heavy work, making sure she ate enough, worrying over every little thing. Clara found it both endearing and occasionally frustrating. "I am pregnant, not made of porcelain," she said one afternoon when Fletcher had insisted she sit down instead of helping him chop wood. "I know," Fletcher said, "but you are carrying the most precious cargo in the world, and I am not taking any chances." They did go down to Truckee in late autumn, as Fletcher had promised. Mrs. Henderson welcomed them warmly and set them up in a room at the boarding house. The midwife, a capable woman named Sarah, examined Clara and declared everything to be progressing normally. "The baby should come within the next few weeks," Sarah said. "You made the right choice coming down from the mountains. Up there alone would have been risky." Clara's labor started on a cold November night. Fletcher held her hand through it all, white-faced and terrified but refusing to leave her side even when Sarah suggested he might be more comfortable waiting elsewhere. "I promise to stand by her," Fletcher said firmly. "I am not going anywhere." The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Clara thought she could not do it, could not possibly endure any more. But Fletcher was there, wiping her forehead, encouraging her, reminding her how strong she was. And finally, as dawn broke over the Sierra Nevada mountains, Clara gave birth to a healthy baby boy. "He is perfect," Fletcher said, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his son. "Clara, you did it. He is perfect." They named him Samuel Fletcher Jacobson, honoring the brother Clara had lost. Little Samuel had Fletcher's dark hair and Clara's blue eyes, and from the moment he came into the world, he had both of them completely wrapped around his tiny fingers. Those first weeks with a newborn were exhausting and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Clara was amazed by how much love she felt for this tiny person, how fierce her instinct was to protect him. And watching Fletcher with their son, seeing the gentleness with which he held Samuel and the awe in his eyes, made Clara fall in love with her husband all over again. They stayed in Truckee through the winter, waiting until Samuel was old enough and strong enough to make the journey up to the cabin. Mrs. Henderson doted on the baby, and the townspeople welcomed the little family warmly. Clara realized she had found community here, people who cared about her and her family. In the spring, they finally made the journey back up to the cabin. Fletcher had expanded it over the previous year, adding a second room that would serve as a nursery. Clara set up the small space with blankets and a cradle Fletcher had built, and the cabin that had been a house became a home. Life settled into a new rhythm. Days were filled with caring for Samuel, maintaining the cabin and garden, hunting and preserving food. It was hard work, but it was good work, meaningful work. And they did it together, a team, partners in building this life. Samuel grew from an infant into a rambunctious toddler with his father's adventurous spirit and his mother's curious mind. He loved the mountains, loved exploring with Fletcher, loved the animals and trees and streams. Watching him discover the world with such wonder helped Clara see it with fresh eyes too. When Samuel was 2, Clara found herself pregnant again. This time a girl was born, whom they named Margaret after Fletcher's mother. Maggie had Fletcher's brown eyes and Clara's blonde hair, and a temperament that was equal parts sweet and stubborn. The years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. 2 more babies came, another boy they named Daniel after Fletcher's brother, and finally another girl, little Elizabeth. The cabin expanded further, growing to accommodate their growing family. Clara sometimes thought about how far she had come from that broken, terrified woman who had stumbled into Truckee all those years ago. She thought about how she had been unable to sleep, haunted by nightmares, barely able to function. And now here she was, mother to 4 beautiful children, wife to a man she loved more with each passing year, living a life she had never dreamed possible. "You ever regret it?" she asked Fletcher one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink. The children were inside, hopefully sleeping, though she could hear Daniel and Samuel giggling about something. Giving up your solitary life in the mountains to take on a wife and 4 wild children. Fletcher laughed and pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. Not for a single second. My life before you was not really living, Clara. It was just existing, hiding, trying not to feel anything. You and the children, you all gave me a reason to feel again, to hope again, to love again. How could I ever regret that? I love you, Clara said, leaning into his strength and warmth. I do not think I have ever properly thanked you for what you did for me, for standing guard so I could sleep. You saved me, Fletcher. We saved each other, Fletcher corrected. You gave me a reason to come down from the mountain and rejoin the living. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose beyond just surviving. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade from the sky. Clara thought about all the nights Fletcher had stood guard outside her door, keeping the nightmares at bay. And she thought about all the nights since then, waking up beside him, feeling safe and loved and whole. The nightmares still came sometimes, even after all these years, but they were different now. Now, when she dreamed of Samuel dying, she also dreamed of the nephew who carried his name, running through the meadow outside their cabin, alive and healthy and full of joy. Now, when she dreamed of the wagon train, she also dreamed of the life she had built afterward, the family she had created, the happiness she had found. The past was part of her, always would be. The grief lived in her still, but it no longer defined her. She was not just the woman who had lost her brother. She was also the woman who had survived, who had healed, who had dared to love again despite the fear of loss. She was a wife, a mother, a mountain woman who had found her place in this wild, beautiful world. Years continued to pass. Their children grew into capable, kind young people. Young Samuel, now 19, was as skilled a tracker and hunter as his father, though he talked sometimes of going to college back east, of seeing the world beyond the mountains. Maggie, at 17, had her mother's love of books and her father's practical nature, and was teaching her younger siblings to read and write. Daniel and Elizabeth were still children, 12 and 10 respectively, wild and free and happy in the way children should be. Clara and Fletcher grew older, their hair graying, their bodies showing the wear of years of hard mountain living. But their love had only deepened, aged like good wine into something rich and complex and enduring. One evening, as they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary, their children had prepared a special dinner and insisted on serving their parents. As Clara looked around the table at her family, all of them laughing and talking, she felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. "What are you thinking?" Fletcher asked quietly, noticing her expression. "I am thinking about that night 20 years ago when I asked you to stand guard so I could sleep," Clara said. "How desperate I was, how broken I felt. And I am thinking about how that one act of kindness changed everything. You could have walked away, could have said it was not your problem, but you did not. You stayed, and you kept staying." Fletcher took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm in a gesture that had become familiar over the years. "Best decision I ever made, standing guard for you that night, every night after, for the rest of my life." "For the rest of our lives," Clara corrected, squeezing his hand. Their eldest son cleared his throat. "Ma, Pa, we have something we want to say." The family quieted, turning their attention to young Samuel. He stood, looking nervous but determined. "We just wanted to say thank you," he said, "for giving us this life, for building this home, for showing us what love looks like. I know your stories, know how you both came from hard places, from loss and pain, but you did not let that break you. You found each other and you built something beautiful. And you gave us a childhood full of love and safety and wonder. So thank you." Clara felt tears streaming down her cheeks. Fletcher's eyes were suspiciously bright as well. Their other children murmured their agreement, and Maggie came around the table to hug her parents. "We love you both so much," she said, "and we know how lucky we are." That night, as Clara and Fletcher lay in bed, she thought about the journey that had brought them here, the pain and loss that had driven her to Truckee, the trauma that had stolen her sleep, the kindness of a mountain man who had stood guard so she could finally rest. And she thought about everything that had grown from that kindness. "This family, this love, this life, Fletcher," she said softly into the darkness. He was already half asleep, his arm heavy across her waist. "I sleep peacefully now, every night, have for years. The nightmares are gone." "I know," Fletcher said, his voice warm. "I am glad. But you still stand guard in your way, still protect me, still make me feel safe." "Always will," Fletcher murmured. "That is my job, my privilege, guarding you, loving you, standing beside you." Clara smiled into the darkness. "And that is mine too. We guard each other now." "We do," Fletcher agreed. "That is what love is, I think, standing guard for each other's hearts, keeping each other safe, helping each other rest." As Clara drifted off to sleep, safe in the arms of the man who had first given her the gift of rest all those years ago, she thought about how far they had both come. Two broken people who had found each other in the darkness and had somehow, together, found their way to the light. The mountain wind whispered through the pines outside their window. Inside, the cabin was warm and full of love. And Clara Jacobson, who had once been unable to sleep through a single night, slept peacefully, guarded not by a man standing watch outside her door, but by the love that lived in her heart and in the hearts of her family. She had survived the worst life could throw at her. She had learned to sleep again, to hope again, to love again. And she had built a life worth living, a legacy worth leaving, a love worth celebrating. The story that had begun with so much pain and fear had become a story of healing and hope and happily ever after. And that, Clara thought as sleep claimed her, was the best ending she could have ever asked for.